From PC Gamer, by the time Bethesda was on Starfield, you'd, quote, basically get in trouble, end quote, for breaking schedules, says former dev. A lot of the great stuff with Skyrim came from having that freedom to do what you want. This is one thing, we'll look at the article. No, I'll show you it. But one of the things that Bethesda did with Skyrim was something called a game jam. And I'm not sure if they still do this, but they had this thing called
Skyrim.
They had this thing called Game Jam, and I'll let Todd just explain it. But you'll notice a lot of the things he's about to show you ended up as DLC or even features in like Fallout 4 and Starfield. Watch.
We call it Game Jam. Everybody on the team gets to do whatever they want for a week. And they can imagine. But you have to put it in Skyrim. Okay? One of the coolest things about being one of those studios within Bethesda and ZeniMax is every year, every December, all the studios get together and we have a big company-wide meeting and everybody shows their stuff for the year. So, getting to see what id's working on all this stuff early is great. Since we had just finished Skyrim, this year we showed the Game Jam stuff we did. So I'm going to show you the sizzle video from the Game Jam that we did internally, that we showed internally. That's what this video was from. So everyone on the team says, I have to preface this with, this is all experiments that we did in a week. How much of this stuff sees the light of day to be determined? Could it be in a future DLC? We don't know. Could it be various parts of it just be released for free? We don't know. No. But I wanted to show it to you because it gives you a good look at what do we do? We let people run wild and just see what they do for a week.
Okay. So everything you're about to see, their devs did in a week. It's crazy. And you'll see. Seasonal foliage. This was like one of the main selling points of like AC Shadows in 2025 was seasonal weather changes and stuff. One of their devs did it in a week. Granted, it would need more work before fully going out, but they did it in a week for Skyrim.
Just a few more hours and I can crawl under some...
Okay, look at the flow-based water shaders. Like some of this would end up in the anniversary edition of the game years later. A lot of it just never saw the light of day. Kill cams for magic. Okay, that's cool. Ranged combat kill cams. Okay, stealth enhancements such as water water arrows and assassin's vision. So they were just straight up adding like eagle vision. Guards can relight darkened areas. If you put out a torch with a water arrow to create darkness to stealth through, guards could reignite it. Moving platforms in dungeons and stuff. They did this in a week. And the reason I'm showing you this is because like this was what BGS was capable of back in 2011. They were so dynamic. They could do so much stuff so quickly. And granted, this stuff would need more work before going out into the game fully. I mean, we're looking basically at mini mods that have been made that would need polish and there'd be bugs and things introducing. But like this, build your own home, that would come out as a DLC. And of course, a major tentpole mechanic within Fallout and Starfield. So a lot of this stuff like would need more work for sure. But the reason I'm showing it to you is because these things were possible. They could get it done quick and dynamically. And what we'll see in this article is that a lot of that has been stripped out of the company culture. It's just been stripped. So as you can see, when this former dev says a lot of the great stuff within Skyrim came from having freedom to do what you want, because they would do things like game jams at the end of the year, or they would do other more dynamic things where they just would open it up to pitches for devs to like come up with something cool and just put it in the game. You show it to Todd when he walks by your desk, show it to Todd and he's like, I love it. Put it in. We'll do it. And it's in the game now. Whereas nowadays, Todd is on a separate floor of the building. He has 5 producers you have to go through to get to him. Half the time he's not even in the studio because he's off working on the Fallout TV show. You know, it's just very, very different. Starfield sort of came and went, with a lukewarm reception on release and a DLC that didn't quite summon that bygone Bethesda magic, and a dedicated fan base starting to gnaw on their own tails due to lack of communication. This is the other big thing, is that they've just basically gone totally radio silent. And this, unfortunately, is like a common thing for Bethesda. They'll release games and then just stop talking for years. And it's kind of fun when you're excited for Fallout 5 or Elder Scrolls 6. You're like, ooh, when are they going to reveal it? You know, people go crazy for it. But I think for a lot of other people who are just wanting to know, like, are you going to be fixing this broken quest? Are you going to be doing this or that you said you would do? It's very frustrating. An RPG we were anticipating to be a landmark has gone quiet since the vacuum of space, with nary so much as a bit of raging against the dying of the night. Many attribute Starfield's muted response to the idea that Bethesda has grown a bit, well, sterile and rigid. It's a sentiment backed up by former Bethesda dev Nate Perkypile. This is the guy, we've watched his the little documentary they did because he made that indie game set in the woods and everything, and that was really cool. He quit over a deluge of meetings and a more restrictive corporate structure that had worn him down over time. Quote, while I enjoyed working at Bethesda a lot when we were about 65 to 110 people on Fallout 3 and Skyrim, I enjoyed it a lot less as it grew and grew. And this is, most companies have to deal with this, frankly. Like, a lot of companies have to deal with this, where you go from small company to mid-sized company, which is like 100 employees. Once you pass 100 employees, you cannot run things the way you used to. You cannot have a direct personal relationship with every employee if you're the boss. You have to have mid-managers. You have to have other structures in place. You have to have the HR team to supervise stuff. Like, it changes. It just does. And I think that that's a problem. In business school, we talked about one of Jeff Bezos's like philosophies. He's a firm believer in what's called the 2 pizza rule, which is a term he coined, which was basically that he doesn't think a team can be productive unless you're able to have a meeting with the team that can be catered with 2 pizzas. He's like, you should be able to order a couple pizzas. Everybody can sit around a conference room table and talk. He's like, if you have a team bigger than that, things change, and you can't be anywhere near as dynamic. You can't like brainstorm ideas the same way. It just doesn't work as well. So 2 guys, I think it's those big Seattle pizzas, you know, those big West Coast pizzas. But I think, it's called The Axis Unseen, is Perkypile's indie game. Everybody should go check it out, wishlist it, buy it, go support him for sure. But basically the idea is that once teams grow past the point of collaboration and free discussion and discourse, you'll start to have ideas fall through the cracks. You'll start to have people grow frustrated. They feel like they can't contribute, or their voice isn't being heard because one of the other devs is a little bit louder or more assertive. So they just get their ideas trampled on, and it just starts to fall apart. It doesn't work the same way. So you have to put in processes to have a manager kind of supervise it and make sure each important idea is being heard. And that's a whole other thing. You know, there's some people that are good managers, but there's a lot more people who are managers who are bad and are only managers because they like the power, they like the higher pay, whatever. So it's not always as simple as just put a manager in place. But he said Perkypile had more to say about his years at Bethesda when PC Gamer caught up with him at the GDC conference, the Game Developer Conference 2025. He recalls those halcyon days of Skyrim with no small amount of nostalgia. Quote, we had quite a bit of freedom to do stuff. The one that people know about was Blackreach. That was not on schedule at all. Like, we just kind of did that on the side and put it in. Skyrim's werewolves, Perkypile adds, were another novel concept and, pointedly, a passion project as well. Quote, that was a whole side project from somebody. Originally, it was just dudes with dog heads, and someone took it upon themselves to make it awesome. Ultimately, he reckons, quote, a lot of the great stuff within Skyrim came from having the freedom to do what you want, as opposed to a game with this whole checklist design and design by committee. Which is also kind of funny because that's been one of the frustrations with Starfield, because people feel like if it had a checklist, it maybe would have gone better, because it feels very, again, Starfield's just such a fascinating thing because it seems like there's a few core pillars maybe on the checklist that everybody knew about, they had to use. But one of my frustrations is like a lot of the cool ideas. So for example, it's been long enough I can mention it. We're going on 2 years. There's like all these space magic Fus Roda abilities in Starfield that they kept secret before the game launched. And then it ended up basically just being that you go to this one location, these like temple looking things that are scattered throughout the game, and they give you these abilities that you can then add to, like, turn off gravity in this specific area, or push things. You know, there's different abilities you can do. Slow time. I was excited for there to be like cool, maybe secrets or puzzles tied to it, where you have to have this particular space magic ability to be able to suspend gravity, so maybe the weighted plates don't sink anymore, so you can float across a long corridor that's booby trapped, and you can get to the valuable treasure on the other side. I was excited for stuff like that use those abilities, and basically nothing ever comes of it. It's like they came up with that, they had the guy that was doing that over here, and he did that, he put those systems in, and then they had everybody else over here doing something else, and they had all of the combat guys over here, and it just didn't feel like it came together. Because again, what you want in a game is all of the systems to integrate. You want everything combining, whether it's, you know, in Monster Hunter you go do hunts to get like pieces or crafting materials off of the monsters they use to upgrade your equipment and use to upgrade your weapons and armor and stuff. And while you're out on the hunt, you also are collecting foliage or flowers or bugs and things, and use those to craft together with these other things to create potions you're going to use for hunting monsters to get better armor and weapons, to hunt even better monsters, to go to even higher level areas with better bugs and better flowers and plants and stuff. And everything kind of spins on itself. Everything is integrated. And in Starfield, it just felt like it was a bunch of spokes coming off of a wagon wheel, but there was no circle around it. They just all splayed off in different directions and didn't come together. Let's see. NG says, I just can't believe they thought exploration was good enough to satisfy the claims they made. Like, how can they not see that there's literally nothing fun on the surface of planets? Well, NG, I think that this is the thing when you start with a concept, and I really think that this was the fundamental issue and foundational issue within Starfield, is that Todd said early on, I want to create a space game, and I want that space game to be where we say yes to the player. That's what he says in a lot of interviews. We want to say yes to the player as much as we can. We want to have 1,000 planets. Yes. Can I land on any of them? Yes. Can I land anywhere on them? Yes. And so he wanted to say yes in all these ways. And I think he decided very early on in development that that's what they were going to do. And what the old article was that we talked about on stream was they tried to find the fun after. And they said that they only found the fun like 7 years into development. Todd Howard says it took 7 years to make Starfield fun. I thought we would find the answers faster. It was only in 2022, Starfield's original release year, that the RPG got fun, according to Todd. And I think that that's and they still never found it. I think that's the foundational issue, is that they started with the ideas of what they wanted to do, but they didn't start with a fun concept or a concept that players would connect with just inherently. I think the idea was the fun will be traveling to planets. The fun will be landing anywhere you want. But I don't think that ends up actually being fun, which was the major miscalculation, like we saw with No Man's Sky as well. And that's why I think that this is more, I don't feel as sympathetic towards it, you know, because I'm like, other people had tried to do this, had tried to create the dynamic procedurally generated planets, and the biggest frustration was they're all boring and there's nothing to do on them. You can go to 1,000 different procedurally generated maps basically, but that's not inherently fun, you know. And I think that the problem was that they just started wanting to do that, and they didn't start with the idea, is this, you know, with an idea that was really, really fun. But as we continue on, there's actually an early game quest going over Starfield's lore, its mechs, the long war since past, which is inadvertently a total buzzkill, because it winds up pitching you on a game you'd probably rather be playing, you know, set in a time where the interesting stuff is actually happening. I can't help but wonder if the slow reduction of freedom and flexibility made for a vanishingly small amount of interesting characters and places in Bethesda's catalog. In other words, maybe what Starfield needed was space werewolves or a space black race reach. Alas, Perkypile thinks, quote, you would basically get in trouble for doing that in modern era Bethesda because everything does have a cost. It's not even unreasonable, mind you. He's quick to clarify. If everyone is doing that within 500 people, it's a mess. But with, 100 people, it's much more manageable and where a lot of the interesting things come from. And I think that this is ultimately and really at its core, this is why Bethesda in 2025 and 2023, I guess, with Starfield, I think that's why it feels so different. I think this is because people remember this era of Bethesda, and this era was really fun. You never knew what to expect because it was, they had found a way to tap into the creative genius of so many of their employees and to utilize that and put it in the game. And nowadays, as companies grow, in order to deal with that scale, you eventually have to start putting in rules and processes and layers of management, and that just slowly sucks the soul out of those projects because people can't just freely decide, this week I'm going to work on the werewolf thing. I think I can figure it out. No, your boss is going to come to you and be like, what do you mean you're working on werewolf? Stop it. Go work on that. Like, you're supposed to be working on this level, and the whole thing is buggy right now. You got to fix that and fix this, and it just doesn't work anymore. And it's something we've heard a bajillion times with Will Shen. He did a talk at DICE. No, at GDC. Was it GDC? Yeah, it was GDC. That was really interesting. We've touched on it a handful of times on stream. But you'll recognize him from a lot of the promotional videos of Starfield, where he was in a lot of them talking about it. But you can see like the sheer number of people that worked on Skyrim. Yeah, you could have a smaller, more tightly managed team. It worked. You can be very intimately aware of what's going on. Fallout 4, starting to get a little more chaotic, but we can figure it out. Fallout 76, forget it. You're losing track. Bear in mind also they had another team in another state that was working on it, And then Starfield, yeah. I mean, look how many contractors, how many people they had helping with it. It's crazy. It's just madness. So I think unless Bethesda can find a way to restructure to preserve that company culture, I don't think that there's necessarily a way for it to return to form. Which is why people will ask, like, do you think we see the old way of Bethesda games coming together? I'm like, I'm not sure, man. Like, I really don't think so. Because it's not like this is new. You got to remember, it's 2025. This change started happening with Fallout 76. Fallout 76 was 7 years ago. It probably started happening right after Fallout 4 in 2015, going into 2016. So it started happening like 9 years ago, going on a decade ago. Like, the company culture has changed. This is just what they are now. There's no like magic Control Z undo it. This is just what it is. And you listen to all the interviews, it doesn't seem like Todd or any of those guys have any problem with it. They seem totally content. They seem totally fine with it. Giblix, thank you for that. Tim Kaine also explained how making a small iteration that could be done in an afternoon would take 3 weeks due to hyper specialization of tasks, and only that one person is allowed to do the thing. Yeah. It's just, and you see, with a team that's this scale, you basically have to have a checklist of activities. And so what ultimately ends up happening is, instead of having the department that's doing the main story or doing side quests, you have a team at this studio who's doing side quests, a team over at this studio is doing side quests, a team over at this studio is doing side quests, and it's all kind of splintered around. So you have managers and producers who then go in and they have the checklist, and they create the checklist of, okay, you're going to do 3 quests. We're going to make them combat focused. And you guys are going to do 3, and these are going to be puzzle based. And then you guys are going to work on just scattering things in the world. So maybe you just make 2 POIs, okay? 2 POIs, figure that out. And then they assign these to team A, and then this goes to team B, and this goes to team C. And you can get stuff done, but this is ultimately why this all feels so disconnected. Why The combat encounters don't feel like they tie together with the puzzles or the POIs or anything. Like everything feels super disjointed, like I said earlier, with the spokes going off in different directions where gameplay systems don't really tie together in any notable way. Like one of the coolest things in Starfield is the ability to have like rooms full of junk, and then you can use your zero gravity ability to make it all float. It's just kind of cool, but you would think maybe there's a way they could do a puzzle with that, right? Well, they have a room in the expansion that's a small room filled with garbage. It's like a trash compactor. And to get to the door, because all the garbage is blocking it, you have to turn off gravity, and then you can get to the door because all the stuff floats out of the way. But like that's one of the very few times I can think of that they used it, you know? But it's just because, again, it's very possible that Team C didn't even know that that was going to be in the game. They didn't even know that the zero gravity ability was going to be there, because maybe that was being handled by Team, you know, F, all the way down the chain of command, all the way down the hierarchy. And, you know, this hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. So they didn't know to create a POI that utilized that system. This is also why documentation is important. So you have that stuff established early on so everybody can work, you know, around those similar ideas. But everybody I've spoken to, all of these interviews just seem to reaffirm that core idea, which is just that the company's too big and it's not managed well to juggle this. And I think that's ultimately the core problem. NG, think of the 5. What is the point of studios having such large teams? I get that things can maybe get done faster, but if things worked before with Skyrim, why change? The problem is the standards have changed. So players will not tolerate a game like Skyrim if released today with Skyrim's, you know, level of fidelity, for example. You need much higher quality assets. You need higher quality textures. You need to have a much more robust melee combat system. You need to have, you know, a seamless open world, probably, right, Bethesda? You need to have like all these other things that are much more complicated, and you could get away with not doing back in 2011. In 2025, these standards are higher. You know, AA does it though. Well, even AA, some of their stuff is just tighter in scope. So you might have an Avowed type game, but even Avowed, like if they were charging, or if Avowed was on the scale and budgetary scale of something like Starfield or Elder Scrolls 6, I don't think people would find it acceptable. So I think it's just, it comes with it. You want to scale up because you want to go bigger and badder. And on the AAA scale, tastes evolve and change, and people demand cutting edge tech and cutting edge graphics and fidelity and stuff. And what you're seeing is when you aren't able to achieve that, like your game gets crucified. And even a lot of Starfield stuff, you know, it got critiqued for like the soulless faces, and it got critiqued for like the constant loading screens. And that was even with all those employees. So, you know, I don't think for them it's clear adding more employees doesn't magically fix things. It's not, you know, some sort of magic panacea, but I think for them it's just they've got to fix their process. They got to fix their systems, but you can't fix something unless you think something's broken. And I don't think Bethesda leadership feels anything is wrong. Let's doge at them. That's the thing. I don't even know necessarily if they've overhired. I think, again, it's just process. I think because they have it set up in this way where, you know, team F has to go, Team F has to go and report to this manager who, you know, Alpha, and then Alpha goes and reports to his manager who's a Beta, and then Beta goes and reports to Todd, the almighty Todd father. That can work, but because of this, like Todd is outlining what he wants to all of these other leads, and then those leads all are splintering off to their teams that they're supervising. And if you want to go get approval from Todd, you got to wait till he's available. He might not even be in the studio. He might be off working on the show, working on something else, traveling, promoting, whatever. And so there's just too much bureaucracy. And then, you know, you need something done by this team over here because team Zeta is working on, maybe they're the art team, and you need something made for a quest over here. Well, you got to wait because you got to pass the word up through this manager. He goes to this guy. He has to then go over to their supervisor. And then that supervisor passes it down to those teams and then finally gets over to them. And they've got 15 other things they have to do. And before long, you're just wasting time and resources, and it's just way, way less efficient than what it used to be. In theory, it should be more. They should be able to do way more stuff, but I think in practice, it's not with how they have it set up.
Caleb donated $10 through Super
Caleb.
Chat. BGS should be split into 3 teams, no more than 200, with 1/3 of them just being artists and whatnot to make more models. Each team works on one of the IPs on a 6-year cycle, and a team for creation kit.
I think a team scoped similar to that probably could work. I mean, it's part of it also is they're using a lot of outside resources. I mean, you can see all of these secondary teams. Machine Games reportedly helped them fine tune the FPS, like the actual shooting stuff for Starfield. So they had Machine Games coming in and helping them with the shooting mechanics. They had Undertone Effects, Nobody Studios, Forge Interactive, GameSim, Snowed In, Sparasoft, Multiplayer Group, Iron Galaxy, the guys that did that infamous Arkham Knight port and are doing The Last of Us Part 2 port here in a few days. ZeniMax Online of all studios, was helping at one point. Arcane was helping on Starfield. Like, it's not even just in the studio. Like, they're using people from all over the company to try and get stuff done. But that's why, like, ultimately, I think for BGS, it's clear the problem's not resources. It's organization, it's process, it's direction. And, Starfield's a big game. I think a lot of people's frustration is it's probably too big. And it's weird. It's both too big and not big enough. Like, it needs more POIs. It needs more content there. It needs more things to do, more variety, more interesting things to do. But the only reason it needs that is because it's so big, because it has 1,000 planets. So if they pulled scope back, they wouldn't need to go as big. But it's kind of like, they decided to bite off way more than they can chew. And it's like, yeah, well, you took the bite. Now you got to chew it. If you hadn't bitten it, you wouldn't have to chew at all. But you decided to do this. So this is where we are. So interesting little tidbit about Bethesda's company culture. But as I've said a bajillion times, I don't think they change unless they think there's a problem. And I don't think they think there's a problem. I think all the stuff you see from Bethesda's interviews, from everybody else, suggests that they think there is no problem. Everything's great. When you listen to Todd says we had more players than ever before with Starfield. So I think he thinks maybe they're doing better than they all ever have. I think you could look at Starfield's concurrent player numbers or that stuff, but he can probably wave that away pretty quickly. Oh yeah, people aren't playing Starfield because they're just really excited for Elder Scrolls. So that's fine. I think that might be denial, but also at the same point, you also have to ask, is he even wrong? Because I think for Todd, what Todd cares about right now is player numbers, because that's what matters on Game Pass. And or Emil saying in many ways it's their best game ever. Yeah, I think for them, if they're just looking at player counts, yeah, they probably are really pleased because everybody that had Game Pass tried it. A lot of people fell off of it, but I think for them, they might be totally content. They might not think that there's anything wrong. In which case, I guess, they're just not making games for people like me anymore, which is fine. But it's a bummer because I used to really like their stuff, but they've just chosen to go in this direction that I think is really unremarkable. Well, it's remarkable, but for all the wrong reasons. He took my thing.